A man collapses mid-row. The others don't stop. They can't. They're chained to the same oar. No food, no sleep, no choice. For 24 straight hours, you row or you die. This isn't a movie. It was daily life on a Roman warship. But how did they survive it? Why weren't they set free after battle? And what happened when the ship went down? Here's how it all unfolded. Let's start with this. The iron shackle cutting into your ankle tells the real story. You're chained to a wooden bench as an oar slave, and this is where Rome's maritime power actually came from. Let's be clear about how you ended up here. Slaves captured in war, prisoners convicted of crimes, enemies who bet against Rome and lost everything. The recruitment process was basically, congratulations, you're hired, followed immediately by chains. No interviews, no background checks, just iron around your ankle and a lifetime rowing contract you never signed. 5 men shared each massive oar on quinqueremes, and each person had to pull at exactly the same moment or throw off the entire rhythm. Your 4 bench partners became the most important people in your world, whether you could stand them or not. It's like being forced into the world's worst band, where hitting a wrong note gets everyone killed instead of just booed off stage. Anyone telling you these ships were powered by noble Roman citizens hasn't seen the evidence. The bench measured 18 inches wide, smaller than a modern toilet seat. The ankle shackle connected to an iron ring bolted straight through the wood. Escape meant cutting metal or breaking bones, neither of which worked well when surrounded by ocean and men with swords. The reality was far uglier than maritime paintings suggest, and those paintings were already pretty grim. Darkness filled the ship's belly even during bright sunshine. Your eyes adjusted to permanent twilight while breathing air thick with human misery. The ventilation system was basically hope the wind blows the right direction. Your new neighbors hadn't bathed in longer than memory served. Lice jumped between heads like tiny passengers switching ships. The pest control policy consisted of learn to coexist with your new roommates. Open sores developed where metal rubbed skin raw and infections spread without medical care. Same bench every day. Same chain every night. Same faces inches from yours for endless weeks. The monotony nearly matched the physical agony. Nearly. Because when that drum started beating, the real nightmare began. The drum beat echoes through the ship's belly, and your muscles tense before your brain catches up. This sound now controls every aspect of your existence. Let's be clear about Roman naval speed claims. They're actually underselling the horror. These warships reached 7 to 10 knots under full oar power, fast enough to catch merchant vessels or turn enemy ships into floating debris. Each oar stretched 10 to 13 meters long and weighed more than 3 grown men. Imagine rowing with a telephone pole that someone filled with lead and covered in splinters. The rowing master controlled everything with drum beats from his elevated position, wielding more power over your life than any emperor. Slow beats for cruising, fast beats when chasing enemies, emergency rapid beats for escape. Missing even one beat meant immediate punishment, usually a whip across the back, sometimes losing your daily food ration. Perfect coordination with 4 other men was absolutely mandatory. One person pulls too early or too late, and the entire oar becomes useless dead weight. It makes you wonder how anyone survived the learning curve when mistakes meant everyone suffered consequences. Shifts lasted until officers decided you were finished. 4 hours of steady rowing or 12 hours without breaks. During battles, you rowed until complete muscle failure. Then guards chained a replacement slave next to your unconscious body while the ship continued moving. The Labor Relations Department apparently never heard of reasonable working conditions. Your hands developed thick calluses within the first week. Then those calluses cracked and bled during longer shifts. Your palms resembled old leather that someone had set on fire and then beaten with rocks. Back muscles screamed after the first hour. Your spine compressed under constant motion. Some rowers simply collapsed mid-stroke from exhaustion or heart problems. Their oar would suddenly lag behind others. Guards immediately dragged unconscious men away and locked fresh slaves into position without missing a beat. The drumbeat never paused. If you think modern working conditions are brutal, hit that like button. because we're just getting started with what real exploitation looks like. Battle drums sound faster and more urgent, and your heartbeat matches before your brain processes what's happening. The reality was far uglier than any heroic naval tale. Roman warships carried marines and archers on the upper deck for actual fighting, while your job was getting them close enough to enemy ships. Essentially, you were the delivery service for death. The bronze ram at the front could punch through wooden hulls like a spear through paper. You were basically the engine, brakes, and steering wheel of a giant wooden missile with a very short lifespan. The rowing master shouted commands over drum beats during combat engagements, his voice cutting through chaos like a blade. Full speed meant pulling until muscles literally tore apart. Dead stop meant jamming oars into water to break instantly. The margin for error was roughly equivalent to threading a needle while riding a bucking horse in an earthquake. Anyone telling you naval battles were glorious hasn't seen what arrows do to chained men. Enemy projectiles fell first, whistling past your head like angry metal wasps. The slave 3 benches over took an arrow through his shoulder blade, blood spattering across nearby oars, but he kept rowing because stopping meant execution. Ramming happened incredibly fast when it worked correctly. Every oar slave pulled together while you felt the impact through the entire ship structure. Bronze met enemy wood with sounds like every tree in a forest falling simultaneously. The physics lesson was brief but memorable. 2 objects cannot occupy the same space, and the weaker one loses spectacularly. Frankly, even for an unvarnished historian like myself, it's shocking how casually Romans accepted fire as a naval weapon. Enemy ships launched burning arrows and clay pots filled with flaming oil. If fire reached the rowing deck, chained men burned alive with 0 escape options. The emergency evacuation plan consisted of hope someone remembers you exist and has time to find keys. When ships sank during battle, chained oars slaves went down with them while keys to ankle shackles were lost or forgotten. Water rose past their chests as they sat helplessly locked to benches, watching death approach 1 inch at a time. Surviving combat somehow brought challenges that made the fighting look merciful. Dead bodies make terrible rowing partners. Someone has to deal with the aftermath, and that someone is usually you. Guards walked through the rowing deck checking who survived versus who had become a logistics problem. Corpses were unchained and dragged away quickly before decomposition destroyed what little morale remained. Nothing ruins team spirit quite like your bench partner entering advanced stages of decay. Vision problems, and eventually went completely blind from light deprivation. Vitamin deficiency was Rome's way of saying healthcare was optional for the expendable population. Frankly, even for an unvarnished historian like myself, it's remarkable how quickly human minds broke under these conditions. Depression affected everyone after several months. Some men completely withdrew and stopped speaking entirely. Others developed delusions and held conversations with imaginary people. Psychological support consisted of stop complaining or face immediate punishment. Anyone thinking communication was allowed clearly misunderstood Roman ship management. Talking during rowing shifts meant instant whipping. Whispering during rest periods was technically permitted, but extremely dangerous since guards constantly listened for escape plans. Free speech was about as free as the people practicing it. Escape attempts and rebellions were crushed immediately with extreme brutality that served as clear warnings. Troublemakers were publicly executed in front of other rowers using methods like throwing chained men overboard while still locked to their benches. It makes you wonder how desperate someone had to be to attempt rebellion when the consequences were so obviously fatal. Long-term oar slaves developed distinctive physical changes visible from great distances. Backs became permanently curved from constant forward rowing positions. Hands grew calluses so thick they resembled tree bark. Your body literally advertised your occupation to anyone who saw you, like a business card made of human deformity. Even nighttime offered no escape from this floating prison of human misery. Darkness falls over the ship, but your ankle chain remains locked tight because apparently rest was also considered a security risk. Most oar slaves slept while still chained to their rowing benches throughout the night since guards weren't about to unlock anyone for comfort purposes. Your bedroom, office, dining room, and bathroom were all the same 18-inch wide wooden plank. Truly efficient space management. Ankle shackles stayed locked during all sleeping hours, while rolling over breaking shackles off dead men required hammers and chisels when keys went missing. Let's be clear about post-battle conditions. Blood covered every surface. Your bench, the wooden deck, your clothes and skin. Other people's blood mixed with your sweat and made oar handles slippery enough to cause accidents. The sanitation department was basically you, a dirty cloth, and wishful thinking. Broken oars needed immediate replacement, or they became deadly weapons against nearby rowers. Splintered wooden shafts could impale anyone within reach if not removed quickly. Marines dropped spare oars through deck hatches while chained men installed them from their locked positions. Teamwork at its absolute finest, fixing the instrument of your own destruction. Anyone expecting medical treatment clearly misunderstood Roman priorities. Care was reserved exclusively for valuable slaves with specialized skills. New slaves with injuries were completely ignored until they either healed or died. The healthcare plan was elegantly simple. Try not to become a corpse before we reach port. Battle damage often left ships barely floating above waterline. Everyone who could move helped with emergency repairs regardless of their official duties. It makes you wonder how these vessels stayed afloat when emergency repairs were performed by chained slaves using whatever materials happened to be available. High casualty battles meant immediate replacement time since ships needed full rowing crews. Supply vessels carried fresh slaves specifically for this purpose, like ordering replacement parts, except the parts were human beings, and the warranty was until death or escape. The drums started beating again, and everyone resumed rowing as if nothing had happened, because in Rome's perspective, nothing important had. Food arrives in a cracked wooden bowl placed directly on your bench, and the menu never changes because there isn't one. Daily meals consisted of boiled beans that tasted like seasoned mud, watery porridge with unidentifiable chunks floating like tiny corpses, dried figs hard as pebbles, or barley bread capable of cracking teeth. The barley bread was so remarkably hard it could have doubled as emergency ship repair material. Everything tasted like it had been soaked in seawater and abandoned in direct sunlight for weeks. Forget what you think you know about Roman cuisine. That applied to citizens, not cargo. Olive oil appeared occasionally as a special treat, not for flavor enhancement, but for extra calories and skin protection. It functioned as ancient Rome's combination energy drink, hand lotion, and medical treatment. Water storage presented its own special challenges. Drinking water came from large clay jars, and after several days at sea, it turned green with fuzzy mold growing on top. Consuming it risked severe stomach illness. Avoiding it meant dying of thirst. Your beverage options were essentially poison yourself slowly versus poison yourself quickly. And most people chose the slow approach. Anyone expecting dining facilities had clearly never been enslaved. Meals happened exactly where you sat chained to your rowing bench. Food was dumped into your bowl while you remained locked in position. The etiquette training had been permanently canceled due to iron restraints and security concerns. Before major battles, officers sometimes provided small pieces of salted meat for extra protein during combat rowing. These special meals were incredibly rare treats. Most days brought just enough food to prevent outright starvation, while malnutrition remained completely normal. The reality was far uglier than Roman propaganda suggested. Bathroom facilities consisted of buckets placed under benches when available, or wherever you happened to be sitting when nature called. The restroom was basically any location within your chain's limited reach. You stayed filthy until rainstorms provided brief cleaning opportunities, but malnutrition was merely one way your body systematically broke down over time. Months of constant rowing transforms your body and mind in ways that never fully heal, and the changes are as permanent as they are disturbing. Let's be clear about what infections means in this context. We're not talking about minor scrapes. Wooden splinters from oars and benches created puncture wounds that turned into open sores under constant friction. Your body essentially became a walking medical emergency that everyone ignored. Some infections spread deep into muscle and bone tissue, causing permanent damage that marked you as a former ore slave for life. Sunlight vanished completely from daily existence since the ship's belly remained dark during all daylight hours, creating a special kind of living death. Many long-term rowers developed severe, remained physically impossible. Let's be clear about Roman sleeping arrangements for slaves. Bedding meant a thin piece of cloth or small handful of straw if you were extraordinarily fortunate. Most nights brought nothing at all for cushioning against hard wooden planks. The bedding industry had clearly never discovered ancient Roman warships, or perhaps they had and decided to avoid the market entirely. Warships continued moving during nighttime hours when military campaigns demanded it, because enemy ships didn't politely wait for Roman crews to get adequate rest. Drums kept beating in complete darkness while you rowed half asleep. Night shift rowing was like sleepwalking, except with massive wooden oars and drowning as a realistic consequence for mistakes. Real sleep became nearly impossible due to constant noise from multiple sources. Ocean waves crashed against wooden hulls. The ship's structure creaked and groaned. Chains rattled whenever anyone shifted positions. Sleeping conditions resembled being trapped inside a giant wooden drum during an earthquake that never ended. Occasional short breaks on the upper deck were rare privileges granted only when ships were anchored and officers felt unusually generous. A few precious minutes of lying flat on solid planks felt like incredible luxury. 5 minutes of normal human positioning qualified as a luxury vacation from hell. Personal space was a concept from your previous life that no longer applied. Men slept pressed against each other whether they wanted physical contact or not, while body heat from dozens of unwashed bodies made the air thick and difficult to breathe. Privacy was something that happened to other people in different circumstances, preferably people who weren't chained to rowing benches. One can only imagine the sheer endurance required to maintain sanity when tomorrow would bring drum beats again and the endless rowing would continue exactly as before, with no hope of change or improvement. Just the slow grinding away of everything that made you human. This is what real historical brutality looked like when you strip away the propaganda and face the unvarnished truth. While Rome built monuments to its glory, the foundation was human suffering on a scale that would make modern tyrants take notes. Hit that subscribe button if you want more uncomfortable truths that textbooks won't tell you, because history's darkest chapters are often its most important lessons. Now imagine yourself in that position, feeling your humanity slip away stroke by stroke. What would happen to your sense of humanity after just 1 month chained to that bench?